Have you ever gone after a dream most people would never even try? That was me. I'm Caroline Gardner, a single mom of 3 who thought I could never accomplish something like a triathlon until I did, and everything changed. This is a show about people who dare to go after their dreams, especially when met with life's adversities. So let's go find out why we try. Good morning, guys, and welcome back to the Why We Try podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Gardner, and today I have a really special guest because he is from my town here in Miami. He's also very well known in the running community because he is the co-founder of Lifetime Miami Marathon, Frankie Ruiz. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the invite.
First and foremost, I always like to start off with a beverage. So what did you bring today for a beverage?
I brought the yellow edition of Red Bull.
Yellow edition.
I got 2 kids and one of them's a newborn, so I don't sleep too much. So I guess that's my coffee in the morning right now. Probably not the healthiest way to start your morning, but
is it giving you wings? Is it giving you wings?
It is giving me wings, absolutely.
And congratulations to you. You have many, many different hats that you wear, right, in life. But recently you have become now a father of 2.
That's correct. Yes. Little boy named Matias and a 1.5-year-old Paulina, which she's a handful considering we have a newborn at the house.
Yeah. I mean, that's back to back. I can totally relate. I have 3 daughters and my older 2 are about a year apart. So man.
Yeah, I don't know how you got to 3. I really don't.
You forget. It's something happens and then you just forget. It's kind of like, you know what, Frankie? It's like signing up for a race, right? It's like you're going, why? And then you get that finish line, you hold that little baby, you get the smell, and then you're like, okay. But those 2 a.m.
That's a great analogy.
Those 2 a.m. and those 3 a.m. wake ups, I mean, they hurt, right? That's why you have Red Bull.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. The fact is that if you're going to be training down in South Florida, you probably have to wake up not too far away from that time either. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, luckily we're getting this nice, windy, cooler weather, even though I don't know what's brewing out there and I just don't even want to pay attention to it because I'm in denial. We're not going to have any more negativity for 2020, but we've got some nice cooler weather. But yeah, otherwise throughout the year, we have to definitely get up super early to run and get our training in. But I definitely want to get into something that's really interesting to me. You've been interviewed by so many people over the many years. Miami Marathon, it would be approaching the 19th year. Is that correct?
19 years. Yep. 19 years it would have been, or it is going to be.
It is, right? Recently, you guys made the decision to go ahead and make the Miami Marathon virtual. Right?
That's correct. Yes.
That must not have been an easy decision, but tell me.
No, at all. And you're part of the community. So you know that the community is alive and thriving and active. So to know that people are out there training, and I don't want to say I couldn't, but it was going to be very difficult to provide a space large enough to accommodate all of the runners under today's safety guidelines. We just felt that the most prudent thing was to sort of follow the lead of almost 95% is the latest number I heard of races throughout the country that have had to pause their 2021 editions and their 2020 editions. So we just couldn't go against the grain with 22,000 runners. It was a decision that I wholeheartedly take responsibility for, but by the same token, I say that the reasons for it are much greater than anything that I could have overcome. And I'll say this to the community out there that it's a great time for you to continue those long blocks of training and building that aerobic base, if that term is used anymore, and to stay motivated, because when racing does come back at such a large scale, it's going to feel good. And you're going to be more ready than ever. So don't lose that motivation.
Absolutely. And one of the things that kind of jumped out at me and going online and looking at some of the interviews that you've done over the years, one of the things that was really interesting to me is that you talk about somebody, I think I'd asked you if you run with music. And I think as a triathlete that was a half marathon runner before I ever became a triathlete. That moment where coach was like, "No, you don't use music," and I was like, "What do you? How am I going to do this?" So to read that was actually really impressive to me. And can you tell me a little bit about your beginning into endurance sports and running? It sounds like you started at a young age. So tell us a little bit about that.
The sport of triathlon specifically always caught my attention as a kid. I was a cross country runner, introduced to running by my dad, who was an avid runner in high school, and actually more talented than I ever was. And he did track and did all those things, and sort of passed that sport on to me. So I picked it up at probably 10 or 11 years old after having gone on a few runs with him, and I always found myself that at PE class wanting to run laps instead of maybe playing one of the traditional sports, which I did, but I didn't enjoy as much. And so that sort of personal freedom and that personal responsibility, that I didn't depend on someone to tell me, hey, you're not tall enough, or you're not good enough shooter. I felt like I was empowered to be as good of a runner as possible. So anyhow, that's how my love for running began. And then from there, it evolved into triathlon, and specifically actually a duathlon, which at the time was called a biathlon. I remember it was a SunTrust, or Sunbank, or some bank sponsored a race. And I think I must have been like 12 years old. I might still have, the shirt or the medal somewhere. It was sponsored by Commissioner Sally Heyman, which she's still around down South Florida, but she helped, I guess, organize this thing. And I got on my bike out there, not knowing what to do. And, I went through that first timer experience, which is an awesome, never forget, experience. I remember I had a red bike. I don't remember what it was. I think it was a Trek or something like that. And honestly, I never looked back after that. I was from there hooked on the sport, multi-sport world, and did a few of the triathlon trilogies. And that's how I even got to know my partners that helped me start the Miami Marathon, Robert and Gabby Pozo. We kind of stayed in the running and tri space. And then now sort of fast forward to where I'm at now, and an employee of Lifetime, which acquired all the triathlons I had started, including the Escape to Miami Tri and the South Beach Tri, and a few others that we've had along the way. And so Lifetime now is sort of my guiding light with things such as the New York City Tri, Chicago Tri, and so forth. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's really incredible to me is that in knowing the Miami Marathon, and I didn't realize that triathlon was a part of your journey. Like, I didn't realize that was something that was that I know that just from learning a little bit about your wife. She also is triathlete and into doing all the nutrition and everything. You guys have such a unique connection there. But it was really interesting in learning about that, your venture with triathlon.
Let me tell you this, because I haven't been on too many tri-specific podcasts. So this part of the story kind of gets left out as to how we started the Miami Marathon. But the Miami Marathon was inspired not just by my experience with triathlon and those two partners of mine that were organizing the original triathlon trilogy out of Key Biscayne. The idea for the Miami Marathon was a visit by a young boy named Rudy Garcia Tolson, who I have mentioned this before in podcasts. That he's a triathlete that is a Paralympian, and he at the time when I sort of found out about him, he was 12 years old, missing his legs, and cleft palate, had Townsend syndrome when he was 5 years old, and he still pursued the sport of triathlon. In fact, the ad that caught my attention was a triathlon for San Diego Tri. And I saw it in Triathlete magazine, and I thought, man, that kid looks amazing. I have to meet him. I reached out to him, and I invited him through his mom to Miami to meet my high school cross country team that I was coaching at the time. And in the process, I said, how cool would it be if he came to Miami to do a triathlon? And so he did. We signed him up for the Trilogy Tri, and I think it was like the number 2 tri of the summer. two or three, one of the twos,
Mhm.
one of those three. And we brought him in. He did the swim portion, I did the bike portion, and he did the run portion. So we kind of did a relay. And Channel 7 News covered him that day. And it's just so happens to be that still have that photo of him being interviewed, that the Channel 7 piece that actually airs that night is watched by the mayor and the mayor's chief of staff specifically, who's a triathlete, an Ironman triathlete and whatnot, calls
Mhm.
me up, kind of knows me but doesn't know me that well, and says, "Hey, I'd like to meet that young boy, Rudy Garcia Tolson." So Rudy's brought into the mayor's office. A meeting happens. During the meeting, a conversation's had about what distance he would like to run. The mayor asked him, what's the furthest you've ever run? And one thing led to the other, and we came to the conclusion that Miami did not have a long distance race of its own, a full marathon specifically, much less an Ironman, by the way.
Yeah.
And those were two things on his bucket list. Obviously you have to do a marathon before you can do an Ironman. And here we are 19 years later with the marathon inspired by a triathlon.
Mhm.
And we since then have experienced a half Iron in South Florida. We've got, a full-fledged triathlon scene.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and I think it has a lot to do with that, added
Absolutely.
catalyst there.
I'm so grateful to hear that, because I mean, it blows me away when I had started off this journey of triathlon. I had so many people asking me, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What's wrong with you?" Because the community that I was working in, it wasn't like there were a lot of us were not doing exercising and running and everything. So I had a lot of questioning of like, "What is this? This is crazy." But I had a fear of swimming, and I really wanted to conquer that. But as I went along the journey of learning more about triathlon, I met so many people. And it wasn't just the people that were incredibly amazing athletes that were inspiring. Yes, of course they were, but it was people that were like getting up after every single kind of hit they were getting and challenged with. Thank you so
But
much
there's
for sharing that with
no,
us.
there's two things you said there that I think are important for, for either the new triathlete or the person considering it, or even the avid, is that one, the fear of swimming is real.
Mhm.
So you're not alone in that. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers to the sport, second to maybe the cost of bikes, but we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And then I would say something else that you mentioned is that a whole lot of people ask you, why is it that you're doing what you do, right? And like,
Yeah.
why? And they don't ask it, necessarily out of curiosity. They almost ask it in a
Like,
way
why would
that
you go do that? Why do you need to
yeah,
go
they're
do all that?
yeah, exactly. They're asking you that way, and then some of them are genuinely, especially if they're, older, grandparents or whatnot. They might be asking because they're genuinely concerned for you. But I find that as like sort of, if I had like a little piggy bank, every time somebody does that, I feel like they deposited money in my bank. Where I'm just like, you know what? The more you ask me why I'm doing this, the more I feel like I have to figure it out as to why I'm doing it, and the more I want to do it
Yeah.
to figure that out.
Yeah. With that said, I mean, not to throw 2020 into it, but I keep having the same conversation with many endurance athletes. And you and I actually had a little bit of a conversation about it because, you mentioned that you're a cross country head coach for
Mhm.
Belen. You were telling me about how you would take these kids out and go on trail runs. And I'm telling you, like during this whole entire craziness where everything went sideways in so many people's lives, and then just watching it and not being able to do anything and feeling very like just your hands are tied in so many different areas, getting outside was, and I mean it with being respectful of distances, but going for walks or finding a trail. One of the things that's hanging behind me, a gravel bike, because that was like sanity. That's interesting to me. Tell us a little bit about how you will take some of the students and say like, let's go here, and why is it that you take them on a certain run in a certain
Yeah,
space?
I love taking my high school kids to places where the run typically hasn't belonged, if that's a term. There's a whole lot of space in South Florida that generally is not regarded as trainable or as popular or a typical schedule for an athlete. They always think of Key Biscayne, the Rickenbacker, Bayshore Drive, the Oak Cutler,
The
and
trail.
sort of down
Yeah.
south. But folks don't typically venture out west or to the Everglades. And I love to take the kids out there, one, because I think the exposure to, something new is important, but specifically to get them to experience a space that I think allows you, to really zone out and appreciate some of our sort of natural habitat that many of us don't realize is in our backyard. I mean, we've got several national parks near us. I think it's a haven for runners about 8 months of the year. The other 4, I still like to go down there, but it is a little
Definitely bring some bug spray, sunblock, and extra water packs.
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly, a little less inviting, but yeah, I love going out there. In fact, I was having a conversation the other day with of all, trail runners and ultra marathoners. This name might ring a bell, but Dean Carnazes, and I said to them, I said, hey, we're looking at doing some stuff here in South Florida, and he said, I'm all in. Like I'd love to spend time in South Florida. So I'm hoping that, like I've been taking my kids out there, that I can keep taking, I can sort of take adults out there. I know there's some events already that exist out there, but as Lifetime, we've never ventured in that space. So we will be soon.
To be honest, like living here since 2003, because of the quarantine and having to get creative on where we go, it's like I couldn't believe the peaceful serenity, like all around me, untouched Florida, like untouched oceanfront, beautiful trails that are out there. And yeah, I mean, going safely, making sure that we put all the safety requirements in place, and lights, and having lights. One of the things that a group of us do is a night gravel ride. And that is just like, I feel like we're teenagers again, and the kids in Stranger Things trying to rush home before, like, something gets us. But it's really fun. And it gives you that freedom that maybe it's overwhelming with everything else that's going on in the world,
Yeah. And I think you definitely nailed it by, relating it to playing outside. I think for pre-pandemic, let's call it, most of us saw exercising or going for a bike ride or run as a task, right? Like I've got to eat right, I've got to sleep right, I've got to exercise. And when you think back to your early years as a child, you played outside. Yeah. And we've forgotten to play outside. I mean, we have expensive gadgets, expensive bikes, and so forth, and nice watches and everything, and all we're doing is just like not paying attention to playing. And like you said, like on a night ride, which I got to join you guys, that sounds amazing. That would have been something you would have done with your teenage friends or your school buddies, been like, hey, let's go out there, let's just see where we're going. Yeah. I think there's so much of that to explore. I know that during the quarantine, I posted a few videos or photos of me out there with socially distanced with a few folks, and everybody immediately, where's that? And I realized that people just don't explore. Yeah. They don't. They do the same thing over and over. And I don't know, I got into the sport because I wanted to be different. So I'm encouraging people, to explore.
One of the parks that you, I think you've mentioned too, is Shark Valley, that it blew my mind. Like, this is not something that you can just turn on TV and see, a crazy show of somebody doing whatever with alligators, but this is actually something in our backyard that as we're going into November, December, January is like the best time to go. The weather is fantastic. If you hit it right, you get out there at the right time. I mean, it's awesome.
I did something crazy. This was pre getting married, because my wife said, you should get this out of your system now. But I decided that it was a while back that I looked at the map of Florida, and I realized that the southernmost point, I didn't honestly, I realized it, but I read somewhere that the southernmost point of Florida is Cape Sable in the Everglades. And everyone thinks obviously of Key West, which it is, right, but mainland Florida,
yes,
on the contiguous side. So I invite people to go down there, maybe not to make it as far as we made it, because it's a little dangerous, but certainly dangerous, but at least to take a trail run from Flamingo and enjoy. You almost have 10 miles, about 5 or 6 in one direction, 5 or 6 back. So about 10, 12 miles out there. it is an entirely different world. So if you enjoy Shark Valley, you got to check this place out. I don't think you can bike it necessarily, but definitely running it is amazing. And if you wait a little bit till it dries out, because right now it's a little wet, it's just perfect run. Perfect run out there.
Oh man, thank you so much for that. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will definitely be asking me, all right, when are we doing that? Because sometimes what seems to happen from these conversations is actually we end up doing a lot of the things that we talk about. So that's really cool. Just to wrap up here, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, has the why in maybe not necessarily your tribe, but maybe in all of the things that you're doing, have you seen it maybe blossom or change a little bit into something different over the years now, especially that you're a father of two, and with all the things that have kind of gone on this year? Or do you feel like you've been able to like grab from the past and be continuous? Because it sounds like it's very continuous, like you've maintained continuously your purpose. But I wonder for you if the why has changed a little bit.
I think it changes at different times of the year. I think it changes obviously with whatever's happening in your life at that point. You know, for folks that are asking why often, I think that's the right approach, because it should change. It should, maybe the initial reason as to why you got into the sport, that in itself is always going to be something you're going to remember, but that should evolve a little bit. I think as we grow and as we stay in the sport, it should change. I offer this advice, you know, to triathletes specifically, because it's such an immersive sport that you have to kind of give everything into it, right? Like sometimes family, you know, sacrifices for the time you have to spend in the saddle or with your head underwater. And I do encourage triathletes to, you know, to be balanced with their approach to the sport. You don't need the $20,000 bike for your first try. You don't need to go all in. And I say that because I think if you do it all up front, then what is there to look forward to, right? Like just crawl a little bit, get into the tri space, keep a foot in running or in gravel or in other things. But once you get yourself too heavy into tri from day one, I feel like those are the ones I talk to 10 months later and they're completely out of it. Their bike's on Craigslist and they're done. So if you want to stay in the sport, I think, you know, learn how to enjoy it first before you put all of yourself into it. That's just one thing. But going back to my why, gosh, I think now more than ever, I just want to make sure I'm keeping myself mentally healthy, obviously physically. And that is for the benefit of my kids and my wife more than it is just for my own, you know,
right.
sanity.
Of course. This other interview that you had done, it's interesting because at the end, I think that was something that you had said. It was like, when I'm 80, I want to be running there with the 17-year-old kid. And I find myself many times, even recently, that the Summers events was able to put on in Claremont an event. And I found myself trekking along with a 65-year-old guy on the path there, and he was like, hey, I've got 2 new knees and I am just trying to keep them going. And I'm like, that's awesome. You know, that's life goals.
Yeah, well, it's life goals, and at the same time, I think some of us forget to be an inspiration for others, right? Like we think that inspiring people are the only ones that are entitled to being on TV to inspire people, and they, you know, you have to make tons of money to be inspirational, or you have to be an elected official to be inspirational. And the truth is, you have a chance to be inspirational every time you lace up those running shoes or get on the bike or jump in the pool. If somebody's watching, I don't care if they're in their car or they're passing by, just, you know, on a stroll, they're looking at you, and that's a form of inspiration. Sometimes it's envy. Sometimes it's aspirational. It's something, you know, something they look at and like, gosh, I can never do what he's doing. But I think if you are, you know, that 65-year-old, look, he inspired you that at that moment. So I hope to be that 80-year-old that inspires that 17-year-old to say, hey, I'm going to stay with this stuff until I'm 80, because look at this guy.
I think you're definitely putting those things in place, Frankie. I really, really appreciate your time today, and good luck tonight. I hope you guys get a full night's rest.
Thank you.
I know that those hours of sleep are just so precious. So definitely, you know, congratulations again to you and your wife and to your growing family. And thank you so much for taking the time today to sit and talk with us.
No, thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing here in the community and for the triathlon endurance community. We're going to go through a big endurance boom. And I think you're going to be one of those reasons. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great one.
All right, you too.
That's a wrap for this week on the Why We Try. I hope you enjoyed this episode and this deep dive into the world of triathlon as much as I did. If you're looking for more insights, tips, and training encouragement, follow me over on Instagram. I'm at Why We Try Podcast, and that's try with an I. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your teammates, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Thanks again, and don't forget your favorite beverage wherever you go.